Hello, I'm Marcus Fowler, the Director of Strategic Threat at Darktrace, and I'm here to talk to you about securing the future of work, how cyber AI learns on the job. I guess the first comment probably is, what do I know about what the future of work is going to be? And I think that's exactly what we're trying to wrestle with here when we talk about securing it. And with that, you mean you need something that no matter what the future of work does look like, or the disruptions that come, or the hybrid work from home from the office environment that it might be, you need intelligent security that can adapt with quick changes within the workforce in that dynamic way. And whether it's forced like we recently saw, or just a natural evolution of your business and business operations. For me, as I think about what that security needs to be doing, it's kind of those classic security, the three legs of the stool: visibility, investigation, and response. Those are the critical areas. So as we talk about, and here's the journey we're going to take you through over the next probably about 20 minutes, just a snapshot of my background, because I think it informs my optics and how I relate to security. I've only been at Darktrace for about a year. Prior to that, I did 15 years at the CIA, and prior to that, I'd done 9 years in the military. So we're going to walk through current security issues. We're going to walk through how AI has supported that remote work, some pivots and changes that Darktrace made as a company itself, some threat stories, which everybody loves, use cases, and then kind of wrap it all up with kind of what future remote working and what AI means for that future. So as we look at evolving digital environments and what we saw and the fresh challenges that security teams needed to deal with, we certainly saw a couple of areas really spring out in terms of increased dependency. Beyond just more heavy lifting on VPNs and some of those, certainly more dependency on SaaS that I don't think is going to go away. SaaS adoption and cloud adoption being accelerated. I think there's natural movement there for where the industry was going. Now you're just seeing acceleration in terms of how dependent they are on those as a part of their workforce. And here was that potential loss of visibility, right? As we're changing to work from home, we're moving on to VPNs, we're moving at maybe onto personal devices. That visibility was the first challenge in terms of the transition to this more dispersed dynamic environment, right? And what that impact really was going to mean. And it's not just the disruption we just saw, it's all the potential of global and regional disruptions that are yet to come. So for Darktrace as a company, and I think it's just as important to know just because it shows how many in the industry maybe pivoted or thought or what they were doing, both internally for our workforce, as well as how we were trying to maintain coverage and security for our clients. We quickly recognized that our customer needs were quickly evolving, that their security posture, that their security teams were incredibly challenged, heightened anxiety, lots of distraction, whether it was personal health, family health, or just the pressures of maintaining business operations. Because really that forced work from home really accelerated and put a lot of dependency on business operations first, security will catch up. So one of the things Darktrace was quick to do was, how can we expand our current service offerings as a free opt-in 90 days to maintain another layer of security while there was all this anxiety, this disruption, and increased threat, right? It was basically a buffet for attackers. That anxiety, that uncertainty, starved for information, that is an attacker he's going to take advantage. So our proactive threat notification, so Darktrace's SOC services, we expanded it to all of our customers on an opt-in basis for those 90 days so that they'd have that enhanced layer of coverage that they'd be called in the middle of night if something malicious was happening within their environment. Something we're incredibly proud of how quickly we made that decision. It did start with, what should we do to help our healthcare and the hospitals and all of those that we support, and then it quickly expanded to, can we scale up our analytic resources to cover the entire client base? And it could, and some of the reasons why it could, even at times of skill shortages, personnel shortages, even in these exact skill sets, is some of the ways that we were applying AI in terms of the investigation. We also turned and quickly accelerated some of our R&D efforts. Specifically, one was enhanced email security. and really making that a standalone offering, something we hadn't done before. Usually, we're centered around our overall cyber AI platform, but we just saw real pain across our client base in terms of how they were worried about email and how they were looking for something that moved beyond signatures. And the way we kind of approached that same AI behavioral approach was not for email, is this bad, but does this belong? In understanding relationships, emails, what should and shouldn't be there, really thinking about those sophisticated imposter BEC type attacks. The other was extending SaaS capabilities, SaaS integrations, building out a SaaS UI. That was an area where we saw a real dependency, growing dependency, but loss of visibility and understanding for security teams. And the other was obviously, I think we've heard this numerous times, even before COVID, increasing importance and reliance on knowing more about the endpoint and being able to have more visibility into what was happening at the endpoint, with the eventual possibility of being able to take some type of autonomous response in that endpoint. But really getting more of that information into the intelligence space, that AI brain. One thing that I was really impressed with, and I have to admit we were probably apprehensive about, was would our AI approach, which I should say is that narrow AI, right? Is that complex task savant. It's not going to pass a Turing test, but that application of AI, the way that we were doing it, would it adapt? Could it learn at the speed of change? Because our visibility is based on an unsupervised learning approach, meaning it doesn't have external training data sets. It doesn't need to get retrained. It is deployed with models and classifiers and learns your normal, learns your digital environment in each offering. It isn't a cookie cutter of one person's digital environment that we try and imprint on top of yours. It really does go out and learn your environment. Could that keep up with the speed of change? And it really was amazing and near seamless in terms of, that massive amount of change, but that the AI was able to kind of continue to create and continue to adapt in this rolling situational awareness that enhanced and provided all of that visibility without any massive uptick in alarms when there was a giant transition into what had previously not been normal. And I think that's linked most closely to the way that kind of understanding of normal comes from. It's not just a single device doing a single thing or a snapshot in time. It really is this ensemble approach where you have user device and then clustering of light devices allowed it to adapt very well to what was, by all accounts, a massive change in what was normal. And this was actually able to create and save a lot of time for those already way overtaxed security teams, with a real focus on, as the business was trying to ensure operations continued, securing those business operations, allowing it to have much more business resilience because the AI was there, providing that visibility and insight. Some of the emerging trends that we saw, or threat trends that we saw in this space, not going to surprise anyone. Spearfishing, novel phishing account attacks, those BEC, impersonation. As I mentioned before, it really is a heightened time of anxiety and disruption and starved for information. When is my business going to be open? What's happening within my town? What's things within my state? Really just starved for information to go out and click on and see things, right? A hacker's delight, if you will. The next thing is what are the follow-on attacks going to be, right? I think you have some latent threats that are out there, right? You have some machines that may have already been implanted and attacked that are going to be brought back to that company's environment, and then it's going to have the opportunity to then go down. They're sitting dormant, right? There's going to be more waves of attacks, especially with the level of uncertainty now, a potential second wave of the pandemic. How are people's workforces changing? Again, continuing to be able to. We also saw a circling back of attackers, right? To the sense that you had hardened companies that maybe had been looked at by attackers and thought moving on to an easier target. But then you had this disruption, this workforce change, where all of a sudden targets that were considered maybe not on the target deck or not viable Now we're a lot of potential and opportunity and circling back. And the scaling up was already pre-positioned because that's what they've been doing all along. So a number of different factors playing into not only emerging threat trends, but growing. I mentioned how we expanded our coverage in terms of the proactive threat notification, but that meant we got a lot more intelligence with regards to what was happening within those environments in terms of threat. I don't think it'll surprise anyone that those first couple ones, but the out of hours attack really made me think, right? When I see that, I think, okay, what are hours anymore, right? Who's doing 9 to 5? Who's 9 to 5, right? We're now in this remote workforce environment. Is that 9 to 5? It almost is time zone. Who's 9 to 5? So how is that security team really now to have their heightened alert while the majority of their workforce is working or isn't working? And I think there's a real graying of working hours. And that could either mean greater strain on the security team, trying to spread and cover all hours, or greater dependency on the technologies that watch while those on guard are asleep. The other increase, not a surprise, ransomware, 7% increase there, tipping up. I mean, I think I was asked recently in an interview about ransomware and the perception that it had actually gone down. And I think it isn't that it's gone down, it's that a lot of other things have gotten worse. So despite the trend of ransomware continuing to go up, there's so much other to be focused on that it isn't seen. I want to pull on the thread of the crypto mining a little bit. I don't think as you think about it, as there's economic instability, as maybe a partner or a loved one loses their job, or there's more economic strain, economic uncertainty in terms of your employment status from month to month, you may see individuals start to look more towards crypto mining or insider threat, right? And we definitely saw that overall. We saw something similar, and in fact, it was higher in April. So seeing some of those trends, I think, was very insightful for us and helps us stay informed. Here's a couple use cases. The first one being a spearfishing attack, a very targeted one specifically, and it was one of these ones that we're often hearing or seeing in our own companies with regards to individuals approaching or impersonating, C-suite level individuals. Here you had the CEO of an electricity distributor, a very convincing spoof from the company CEO to a member of the payroll department, requesting update the CEO's direct deposit, linking it to a potential fraud that they'd seen. Right? Not too maybe out of the normal, but not so random that it's not easily valid. The domain was not on any known blacklist, and it was actually missed by a traditional email gateway. But we saw some anomalies in the forged sender address, close proximity of the domain to internal employees. So a lot of similarities there. But again, it was does this belong? Another one that we've had is linked to unusual login activity associated with a Panamanian bank. This is a well-known, very large Panamanian bank looking at their Microsoft 365 account. Brute force attack. We saw attempted logins from a country outside the pattern of life. Now, over 7 days, we saw 885 logins. 85% of these were from Panama and considered valid within that normal pattern of life. But 15% were 100% unique and unique to an external IP address, never seen before in the environment. However, very quickly, it was understood that there was actually an abuse of the password reset because those percentages eventually quickly changed. And now the failed login from IP was actually an IP address that was within the normal pattern. And the attacker had actually locked the user out. So observing that visibility of what's happening in these applications has become increasingly critical. But for some security teams, not something they've done or tracked or knew as a vulnerability as much as others. The digital workforce of tomorrow, I think we're all can confidently say that it is going to be a fluid environment. Maybe Marcus has always worked from home and Jerry's always worked in the office. But, when we all start to go back, Jerry might be in the office 1 day a week, two days a week. He might be at home. Marcus might be on the road less and might actually be in the office. It's very dynamic and fluid and adjustable, which is exactly what you need your security tools to be able to do. You also have different people coming in at different times to the office. The return may be staggered. You may have to all of a sudden go back. Again, adapting those fluid changes without any loss to the security overall. Employees may bring malware and vulnerabilities in. That visibility into what's happening in your environment the second something new is plugged in at the earliest possible moment and being alerted to it is going to be critical. We would have previously, I might have thrown up a slide that talked about traditional tools, but really I've evolved that thinking into static tools or unintelligent tools, right? Which really do have their place. However, they are not adequate for the emerging changes in workforce as well as emerging threats. Something that can evolve and adapt to the job, on the job, at the speed of quick change is really what ensures business resilience and business operations. Maintaining that normal will become critical. And again, I speak back to that visibility. I am going to go a little bit into Darktrace's approach here because it is important. We think of it as the human immune system and learning that sense of self, right? So using that unsupervised learning to understand normal to the smallest detail and then enforcing normal, so maintaining business operations without disruption while quarantining those anomalies that begin to appear and evolve as malicious. And thinking about this in that threat agnostic way, so I'm not worried at naming or understanding who the attacker is or what the attack is, because it won't matter. They'll still have to do something different within my environment. And that's what I'm going to stop. This doesn't mean threat intelligence doesn't have its place. I think it is critical and important for enriching and informing your understanding of the threat. But if you are basing your security approach on predicting threat, I think that is an incredibly flawed approach for the current and next generation of attacks. And why the platform approach, having something that allows you to bring in a number of those core areas of information and having them enrich each other. So understanding network more because you have email, understanding cloud and SaaS more, right? And those things informing each other is becoming increasingly clear to cover the entire digital environment. And you'll even see client in there where you're thinking about that endpoint, getting that sensor data from out there and bringing it in. If you're interested in Darktrace's over approach, you can go to our website, you can do all those things, but I will walk you through just the top here where you have the enterprise immune system, which is that visibility in terms of that visibility investigation and action, that unsupervised learning, going out and understanding what is normal and providing that visibility and that clarity. To that top bar, which is the cyber AI analyst, which is that investigation. We use supervised learning, watching our analysts over years, over tens of thousands of events, to now use that AI to conduct the initial triage of every event and every alert, right? Minimizing alert fatigue, distraction, helping with threat prioritization. You now have the cyber AI analyst doing investigation in the background so that when your analyst logs in, the first place they're starting is from a point of action with a fully narrated, fully triaged event, rather than from a point of initial investigation. We saw this heavily leaned on during the disruption, throughout the COVID time and the pandemic, because we increasingly heard from our clients, I had so little time to look at my various tools, being able to lean heavily on something that presented a narrative of what was happening in my environment with regard to different threats and points of areas of action was critical. The other area that was heavily leaned on is that autonomous response, right? So that action element. And that really was knowing and having the peace of mind that when they were running around doing all those other things that were critical, that something was autonomously responding to deviations from normal and enforcing business operations while quarantining that anomalous behavior in order to ensure it didn't becomes something much worse. Because as we're seeing the speed of attacks, they're being measured in seconds, right? Not minutes. You can't eventually get back and check what's going on. So having something that is acting when you're distracted or where you're looking at other things and preventing ransomware or some of these fast-moving attacks was really, really heavy with that. I talked to one hospital. He said it helped him sleep at night when he had a chance to sleep and wasn't trying to ensure all business and hospital operations were moving. And this goes to the greater point of the value of autonomous systems, right? I've already talked through these. The enterprise immune system, that AI providing that visibility, adapting and rolling with the situation with and understanding, that cyber AI analyst and that investigation and supercharging that team. You're not worried about, staff augmentation, right? In a place where we already have, a skills gap, a shortage, whatever you want to call it. Being able to bring more mission enablement across your entire team with technology was critical. And finally, that autonomous response played a very important role. So with that, I wanted to say thank you. I appreciate everyone's time watching this webinar. If you have any more questions about Darktrace, just go ahead and reach out. Have a good day.